Ladies and gentlemen, it's been called the most popular podcast in the history of podcasts by a number of people. They've said, you know what, if there's one podcast you can't miss, it's the Pop Culture Podcast. I take that in. I don't take that to my head. I never let words like that stop the grind. I let it humble me. I let it reignite me, refuel me, and come back here hungrier than ever for another episode of the Pop Culture Podcast. I hope you're doing well. I'm doing very well today. It's my last day as a 34-year-old man for the rest of my life. Unless something massive changes in the next few years, I'll never have an opportunity to be 34 again. But hey, I've heard a lot about the way that science works these days, and I think, honestly, the way that scientific experiments have been conducted over the last few years, maybe there is more of a chance that I'll have to be 34 again. But as the way things are, last day's a 34-year-old man today. So what a journey that's been. How exciting is that you and I can be here to celebrate the last episode of Pop Culture with me as a 34-year-old man. I'm not saying this to try and set the foundation that this show's all about me today, but there's a rule in the Popplestone household that when it's your birthday, it's not just your birthday, it's your birthday week. So if you would like to take that in your stride and celebrate with me, I can send you my address because there's a lot of people are funny when it comes to presents. A lot of people say, I don't really need too much more, but I'm open to being influenced the other way. If you think that there's something that my life could have that I haven't yet got, I would really like to hear from you. But hey, let's get this thing started with a nice little when I was walking through Nepal 2015. Actually, walking through Nepal sounds like a strange way to put it. I was trekking. I was going up the mountains. I was having a fair old crack. We were out in the Himalayas for a month. Every time we walked into a little coffee shop or a little deli, or it wasn't a deli, there was nowhere selling fresh meat there. And any meat I got sick with the oats, let's be honest. So I don't think any of the bacteria in the meat in the Nepalese mountains would have been any good for me. But what was good for me was this. Do you know this song? Surely you can't get done for copyright with a song like this. It's a Tibetan, I think it's what have we got here? Tibetan incarnation music. Try being angry listening to this one. I didn't really see too many angry Nepalese people. Mane Padme Hum, Om Mane Padme Hum. This track goes for 3 hours. 3 hours and 7 minutes. I mean, it'll make the podcast easy. I think it means like peace and love to all living beings. It's hard to get stressed when you listen to Om Mani Padme Hum. Unless you say, I say it to my wife when she gets stressed some days, like if she's upset or if she's angry at me, I go, sweetie, let me give you some Om Mani Padme Hum. She goes, it's honestly really disrespectful. I just want to have a conversation with you about what's upsetting me. I said, hey, you know what? Nothing would upset you if you just let this music just transform who you are as a human being. And it never goes down well, because I think when you use anything in a patronizing way, it never really goes down that well. But nonetheless, it's been a favorite song of mine for the last nearly 8 years since what is that? No, it's only nearly 7 years since I've got back. So whenever Om Mani Padme Hum comes on, which it doesn't, you have to go to YouTube to find that one, because none of the Australian stations really play that one, because I don't know, it's not really asked for. I'd never heard it until I got to Nepal. Anyway, excuse me. I hope I didn't just slurp. I just got a drink then, but I hate it when people slurp into a microphone. So if I've done that, I hope you turned it down at the moment that I did. How's your week been? I hope you've all had a great week. Labor Day long weekend here in Victoria. I don't even know what Labor Day is. I mean, I think we've got to celebrate Labor because it's a very difficult process that women go through. But I didn't know that it had a whole, you have a whole weekend dedicated to it. I mean, we don't have a weekend dedicated to it. He came too soon. Because that'd be highly inappropriate, highly offensive, and I just don't think it's anything to really be celebrated. There's no happily married couple that I know of that celebrate the man not being able to get through a decent session with his beautiful wife. But I think Labor should be celebrated based on the fact that it's a difficult. I'm actually not 100% sure what they're referring to. I know it's not the given birth to a kid, but I mean, it should be celebrated. Surely it looks difficult. I've never seen a woman go through labour who looks like she's really happy with the process. I've heard them reflect on it as though it's something that they'll always look back on with quite fond memories, but they never look back on it and go, hey, that was a really good fun. Do it wasn't like they're going out for coffees with friends. They never explain it that way. They never explain it as though they're just going out for coffees with friends, which is unfortunate because my part, like the part that I contributed to that labour being able to take place, was a very enjoyable time, if not short. But it's all about quality is what I say. The Flight of the Conchords years ago, remember Flight of the Conchords, those New Zealand, it was like a New Zealand duo. It was a comedy band or something. They had a song called Business Time. I'm trying to remember what it was that they were most well known for. I can't quite remember. But what were we talking about? We'll have it. They had a line. They said, hey, but 2 minutes in heaven is better than 1 minute in heaven. And so, if I ever get too excited on a Tuesday evening and 2 minutes is all I was able to offer, I say 2 minutes is better than 1 minute. And I never complain. Like, I very rarely complain unless the lead up to that point of the 2 minutes is too long, because you can't just jump into it, can you? You can't just jump in as a male, and it's not a microwave. A female is not a microwave. They're more of an oven. They have to be warmed up slowly. But when they get there, I'm not sure about all of them, but when they get there, it's fine to put the old potato in the oven, for lack of a better expression. That was quite graphic. It was quite graphic. And 7 minutes in, we've covered some ground. I've gone from a beautiful Tibetan song, which helps me reflect on the nature of life, to, using an analogy of making love as putting a potato in an oven, which it's not really an analogy that you hear used very often, because they're usually referred more to as a sausage. You could put a bun in the oven. I think that's why the expression exists. But nonetheless, hey, we're here to learn together. Been a good day, been a good weekend over here. I've had my feet up most of the day. We went down to the park, caught up with a friend that we hadn't seen for about a year and a half, and she's got 2 kids. She's got the weekend off this weekend. Shaney is her name. We had little Charlie boy, so we went down while she had the weekend off and spent a little bit of time. I'm not stoked about parks as a parent, to be honest. I don't really love spending a whole heap of time at parks as a parent, based on the fact that I always feel like it's a constant flex competition. You'll see plenty of kids who are around about the same age doing certain tasks. Some kids going down slides, some kids using monkey bars. Some kids have their parents help, some kids falling off the swing, some kids staying on the swing. It's it's literally swings and roundabouts when you take your kids down there now. But I'm not sure. Maybe it's just because I'm competitive. But there's certainly a nature of, hey, should my kid be able to do what your kid's doing by himself right now without my assistance? I think the thing that I've been struggling a little bit on, mainly because I saw him fall off the side of it once, is letting my little fella, Charlie boy, go down the slide by himself. For whatever reason, he gets stuck halfway and then face plants forward. I've never seen other kids do it. There's something in his body mass index that doesn't agree with the angle of the slide, and he'll hit a certain dip, and they call it arse over tit in country Australia. I'm not sure what you call it wherever you're listening from, but arse over tit speaks for itself. Something gets stuck, arse goes over tit, metaphorically speaking. He is a boy, arse over chest. But nonetheless, it looks painful. The other thing is, I feel like I constantly leave these parks just feeling as though other parents just have things maybe a little more sorted out than I do. I think it's because I'm a talker. I think it's because I'm a bit more of a talker. I find myself speaking to a lot of parents and forgetting about the fact that I'm not just there to socialise, I'm there to look after my little boy. And the problem with that is, as good as the conversation often is, not always, sometimes the conversations aren't enjoyable and I'm happy to escape early, but sometimes, every now and then, I'll meet a champion and we'll start talking about, it's usually kids. I mean, that's the common reference point. And a couple of weeks ago, I was down there, we were having a chat about kids, about what we're learning, and I made the casual joke, hey, so much to learn, us dads, ha ha ha. He said, ha ha ha, isn't that true? And then I looked up, and just as that conversation had finished, I saw my boy walk directly behind the swing where some kid was going higher than I knew the swing went. Honestly, he looked like, if he was a rocket, I wouldn't have been surprised, because the velocity with which he was traveling up into the air was quite impressive. He was going at rapid speed, and I thought, I got caught up on the uptrend of the movement of the swing, and I saw my boy behind it, and I said, oh, I'm not going to make it to him in time. Like, he's either going to, this could be the end of it. He's 18 months old, but it's been a quality 18 months is what I said. It's been a quality 18 months. And if that swing on the way back down hits him, it could be though it was a quality 18 months with my great little man, is not as long as I was anticipating. And, it got him. It got him real good. And every parent at the park just looked at me. No one's that worried about your kid. Like, they'll pretend to be worried. They'll go over, they'll pick him up, they'll brush him off. And that's one nice thing. Every parent gets together because they understand the value of a tiny little human life. But then the moment they realize who that kid belongs to, they'll make eyes with whoever that person was. In this case, it was me. And every eye just suggests that you do have a lot to learn, and that's no way to treat a kid. And where's his mother? Why are you here by yourself if you can't look at... Charlie's crying. He's got blood coming out of his mouth. He's got bark stuck in his nose. You know what I mean? He had some kid's toy car stuck in his ear. He looked as though he'd been hit by a car. It was devastating. It was a devastating blow to the Popplestone family, devastating blow to the Popplestone name. And we both left that park with our heads down that day. It doesn't matter, because a situation like that, when your kid's just been hit by a swing and you are the sole person who is supposed to be responsible for his safety in that, but no one wants to be associated with you in that moment. I went over and started to try and initiate a couple of conversations, and people sort of just gathered their kids around, gathered their husbands, and started to go to the other side of the park. And I said, I see what's happened here. I see what's happened here. You have judged me based on the fact that my kid's just been hit by a swing. And maybe rightly so. So every time I go down there, I always feel like I'm down there with bad intentions, because every time I see another kid on a swing, I always pray that, someone else, a small child, will go behind that swing, also get hit. So I want to go over and just show grace to the family whose kid's just been hit by the swing, because I understand what it feels, the embarrassment. But truthfully, I wouldn't want to be associated with that bloke either. But when it's you, it's easier to feel as though you're misunderstood. But when it's another person's kid, it's, granted, it's still funny. Yeah, I think it's important to acknowledge how funny it is when someone either falls down a step, be it an old lady or a young man, and to see another young, beautiful child get hit by a swing and get up with blood coming out of his lip, though devastating, and though I pray for his long-term recovery, in that moment, I feel as though the most important thing I can do as a fellow human is piss myself laughing and try and hide it from his family. Because, it doesn't look great. But there's a lot of things that, as a parent, I've started to realise don't look so great. I watched the documentary before Charlie was born. It spoke about how, families with dogs, they raise kids with a stronger immune system. And the reason for that is their immune system's forced to fight off whatever has come off that dog's tongue. Because obviously the dog licks its own asshole. And then when it licks your child directly on the mouth, like, that dog's asshole stuff, apart from in some cultures, is not supposed to be consumed by... But even in those cultures that do allow that behavior, I'm not sure as though it's accepted. I think it's still frowned upon, but it's just quite a fringe group of people who, they find their thrills in different places. But this documentary wasn't taking that angle. This documentary was talking about how important it is that kids' immune systems get strong. So I try and take the opposite approach. I like to let my kid lick things he shouldn't lick, within reason. Do you know what I mean? If it was a scorpion, I feel as though, first of all, it's unnecessary to lick a scorpion. I'm not sure there's a heap in the Queenscliff, Point Lonsdale area. But say, for example, if he's got his mouth on a swing, or if he's playing in it, like yesterday, for example, classic example, we went down to Barwon Heads. We had the afternoon to ourselves. Charlie had a 3-hour sleep. Jesse and I said, this is fantastic. Let's take him down to Barwon Heads while he's in a good mood. We'll have a swim. So Barwon Heads, it's a beautiful beach. It's a beautiful area just to go and get some coffee. Have a look in. I've got this surf shirt here, 34th birthday present from Mum. Thank you very much. I'm still trying to buy clothes to fit the illusion that I belong in a fairly heavily surf culture. So this is just one step in that direction. But we went down there yesterday, and Jesse and I were sitting there having a coffee. And as we were waiting, we just let Charlie have a little bit of a walk around. And all around the road, there's little dog bowls, because it was quite warm. So if you're walking your dog in the area, your dog can stop off and get a little bit of a drink out of a bowl that's just sitting, alongside the steps, alongside the stairs. We're trying to do the best to keep dogs hydrated. Do you know what I mean? We can't have dogs going around looking all, unhydrated. We can't have them walking around just feeling as though their eyes are hollowed out and blacked up just because they're lacking a little bit of water in their diet. So these bowls specifically they're for kids, for dogs, and you never see kids going around and touching them because as parents, there's a certain level of what's acceptable to let your kid do, and there's a certain few things that you probably shouldn't do it in public. At least if you're going to do it, you probably should just do it in the privacy of your own home or in a town where there's no one around. But anyway, we saw Charlie and he was having a walk around, and then we saw him catch eyes with this dog bowl. And I mean, there were some big dogs with some big drool using this bowl not too long before he got there. So we thought it's probably not great that he's near it. So we tried to stop him, but he was fairly adamant that he wanted to put the water on his face and in his mouth and in his hair. And as good, solid and respectful parents, we didn't stop that. We didn't want to discipline him for that behavior. Instead, we wanted to not create a fuss and just let him put that water in his mouth and in his hair and then just see what happens. And just see what happens. You know what I mean? We can tolerate that as parents. There's enough things that you've got to pay attention to that if your kid wants to drink the dog water, just let him drink it. That's essentially when people say to me, hey, we're having a kid in a few months, is there anything that you've taken away from parenthood that might be helpful to me? I go, look, if your kid wants to drink the dog water, just let him drink it. And they go, I don't really understand the relevance of that statement. Why is it that's what came to your mind? And I said, look, don't get too bogged down with the nitty-gritty details of what I've just told you. Just live it out and see what happens. And it's amazing how many people come back to me in a few months and say, that was a despicable bit of advice. I would never let my kid drink that water. And I say, hey, well, different horses, different courses. Do you know what I mean? And that's why your kid's a pussy is what I think. I don't say that to them, though, because that's a disrespectful way to talk about someone that you might not know very well as kids, despite the fact they've never been hit by a swing or drank dog water. But we looked up yesterday and there was a couple, an older couple, maybe, I say older, they probably were maybe just hitting 50. They look good for 50, but they were 50. He was, I mean, this is a controversial statement. I think in many cases, a 50-year-old man looks a bit better than a 50-year-old woman. I'm not sure what it is. There's exceptions to that rule. But this guy in this particular instance was doing better than his wife. He was if he played this game, he was ready for an upgrade. Do you know what I mean? I'm not saying I encourage or endorse that behavior. I certainly wouldn't do it. But I'm just saying if he was open to the idea of that being a possibility, I mean, he had options. Do you know, if he got me in the wrong moment, maybe after a couple of martinis, I might have been half tempted. He was very handsome, actually. He actually could have been sitting with his mum, but nonetheless, I don't know who the lady was. They were sitting there and they were looking at Charlie and they had a look of disgust on their face. And I saw this face and Jesse saw this face as well. So we tried to make light of it, tried to make it a bit of a laugh issue. So as we're actually waiting for a takeaway coffee, we got our takeaway coffee. These people, this guy and his mum or his wife or whoever it was sitting there looking at Charlie doing what it was he was doing. And we said, worse things can happen. Am I right? And you know that you've maybe overstepped the mark of what's acceptable when both people that you're trying to make small talk with, just to avoid the awkwardness, opt for the awkwardness and sort of just look away from you, roll their eyes and sort of semi-shake their head. And so Jesse, we've become used to that kind of thing now because Charlie is a bit of a barefoot bandit. He likes to walk around glassy areas and areas where there's plenty of places to stump his toe in bare feet because that's what's comfortable. You know, we're trying to raise a kid who's tough and a kid who's he can get through a bowl of dog water without any serious side effects. He can't be like me and try and go out to the Great Barrier Reef. And then I've just activated Siri. I'm not sure how that happened. But I think when the music decides to talk, maybe this is a message to the parents and the family who are sitting there, the old man and his wife or mother. You know what? Life is temporary. We're only here for a short amount of time. It's important that we don't allow a boy drinking out of a dog bowl to upset us, to throw off our equilibrium. Do you know what I mean? We've been working for a long time to reach a state of enlightenment. So thank you very much for that contribution. I'm going to put that to the side there. But this family, they opted to take the awkward route. And so Jesse and I walked away. We thought, all right, let's just forget that didn't happen. So we went down to Barwon Heads. We got his nappy off because he also likes to run around in the nude, which, I mean, my mum's not stoked with the fact that we allow that because she often has this hypothetical that there's a pedophile. She calls them pedophiles, which I'm not sure. Something with age, the way you pronounce words, I think as you get older, starts to vary a little bit. Have you ever noticed that? Like my nan, when she was 45, she used to say white. Like, what colour is snow? Snow is white. But then as you get a little bit older, there's something in you that makes you feel as though you have to do whatever you're doing with a bit more sophistication. And all of a sudden, white becomes white. Have you noticed that? And I think my mum's at that crossroads now where certain words are starting to take on a different pronunciation. I don't think the way... It sort of goes back to Old English, which is maybe appropriate based on the fact they're getting older, but it's just not the way that you knew they said the word. So, like the word paedophile is I think correctly, unless you're British, pronounced pedophile. I mean, I could be wrong. I always thought the word for vaginal was vaginal as well. My wife tried to correct me on that, and that was an interesting conversation. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not every day at dinner we start talking about vaginal versus vaginal, but I get quite cocky with the way I think words are pronounced. So please correct me if I'm wrong. I'm open to your correction here. Not on the word vaginal. Do you know what I mean? I think the Americans say vaginal. Maybe it's that. But she calls them pedophiles now. So he goes down there, runs around with his little bean flicking around, and she's like, "Oh, what about the pedophiles?" Oh, she said, "I'm going to buy him a little pair of jocks just to cover up his bits," and that's I think that's a controversial statement as well, because who says a pedophile doesn't appreciate, a moderately clothed victim? You don't know. It's not an area that I'm well equipped in, or am planning to develop much of my knowledge on. It's not an area I'm passionate about. But anyway, we sort of didn't take that too seriously, but we thought, we'll take him down there. We got there, we thought, gee, this water looks green. It was a rough day out for the Popplestone family upon reflection. This water looks green. I said, babe, what you'll notice is, can you see the angle of the sun? It's shining down, it's reflecting off some glass, and as it hits this particular piece of water, it looks as though it's green, but actually it's probably quite clear. It's just our perception of this water. Do you know? It was quite an enlightened statement to make. And she says, okay, but it just looks very green in comparison to the water a little bit further upstream. And I said, sweetie, look, yeah, you're over-analysing it. It's the sunlight, and it's the way the sun bounces off the water. So we let our boy have a swim. We're jumping in, we're dunking him under, we're throwing him in the air. He's laughing, we're having fun. He starts to look more and more like Shrek the longer he's in there, just gradually getting greener and greener. Then we take him for a walk up the beach as a little green Shrek baby, and one lady pulls us aside and says, about a 50-year-old lady, they seem to be the ones who are most passionate about your child's safety. It's always the people, like it's the 50-year-olds who see your kids drinking dog water and say, that's probably not acceptable. And this was another one. She was lovely as well. She came up and she goes, I just wanted to clarify, has your boy been swimming? And I said, yeah, no, we've taken him in there for a swim. She goes, look, there's been a warning sent out to everyone in Barwon Heads that no one should be in this water based on the algae that's in the water. I said, I thought that was just a reflection of the sun. She goes, reflection of the sun? She goes, look at the colour of your kid's hair. Like, he's got green in his hair. His eyes have turned green. Keeps talking about a donkey. and so we took him back to the car. Do you know what I mean? We took him back to the car and we wiped the algae off his head. He had a bath when he got home and he seems fine today. Slightly sleepier, he's grown 4 foot. He hasn't. He's fine. He's still a little fella. But parenthood's hard in that way. Because there's so many different expectations. Some people are germaphobes, some people are not. But what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Life is about learning, is what I always say. That's the motto. I wake up and every morning I open my eyes, I go, life is to learn, Poppy. And Jessie goes, babe, can you not say that every morning when you wake up? And I say, well, it's just an inspirational way to get my head in the right part of the game to start the day. But life is to learn. Last week I learned a little bit. Went down. We had a Geelong open mic comedy night. Actually, I'm not going to lie to you. It wasn't open mic comedy. It was a booked gig. $20 for the gig. 10 minutes of comedy. It was a really good gig down at the brewery here in Geelong, which is good for me. If you don't live in Victoria, you're not going to appreciate that 2 or 3 times a week I'll drive down to Melbourne, which is a 90-minute drive. Not too bad. I do get to miss out on bath duties and bed duties with my boy. So it's technically a little bit of an easier afternoon/evening for me. But to have a gig out in Geelong, that means it's only a 25-30-minute drive. Geelong's a bit more wild though, I think. Geelong's a little bit more wild than what the Melbourne crowds are. For whatever reason, maybe it's just the stereotype of what regional Victoria is. But Geelong it's considered maybe a little more bogan, which is steep for me to say, having been born and bred in a town called Traralgon in East Gippsland, known for swingers parties and petrol sniffing. I'm pretty sure, among other things. I think Traralgon is an indigenous word for little fish. because there's a river that runs through the town. But you didn't want the history of the Indigenous culture that sort of walked through that town. You just wanted to hear a little bit more about this Geelong comedy, I'm hoping. So we went down there, and it really lived up to the expectation. However, I was thrown off because when we got there, there's quite a few people drinking like quite a fancy glass of Shiraz. I thought this is what I was anticipating at a brewery. I was anticipating a little more, just a little bit more vulgarity, a little bit more aggression, maybe a little bit more alcoholism, maybe a few less teeth. And then I was the first act up and thought I was going to come out swinging and get the audience in the mood, but for whatever reason it was a little bit reserved. I thought, maybe it's just me. There was a couple of other comedians up, not me, far after me, so I thought these guys would be a good gauge. And I mean, it was a bit of a tough crowd. The atmosphere in the room, for whatever reason, it was slightly awkward. I heard the week before the place just lit up, and so we got through the night. We had a little break after 3 acts. There were 6 or 7 of us. And then on about the fourth act, a man came in a wheelchair. He had a hole in his pants. He wasn't wearing jocks. I could see his asshole. Not the actual hole as much as the crack. Do you know what I mean? Unless he bent down at the right angle and the light shone, I wouldn't have seen it. But I mean, you didn't have to use too much imagination. And they came in and they were heckling the comedians that were up, not with actual good, well thought out heckles, but just with conversation. And I often think that's the worst kind of heckle, because if you go into a room and everyone's there for comedy, even though the audience wasn't really laughing a whole heap at what was taking place, they were showing a decent level of respect to the acts that were getting up. Not that I want to be some judge of what the audience is supposed to act like, but I'm more trying to give a bit of an overview of what this actual audience was doing, and so that's what it was doing. They were being respectful, and this man and his wife walked in. I assume they were married. He looked out of whack. They were both a couple that I'm pretty sure they were heavily intoxicated. He was sweating a little bit and it smelled like bourbon. She was sweating a little bit and it smelled like blood, which is, that's what, maybe it wasn't actually sweat as much as just a head wound. I think she actually had a head wound, and I mistook it until this very moment as sweating blood. A little bit of a Jesus vibe I thought was going on in the New Testament as we hear about him being nailed to a cross. But it wasn't that. It was actually, I think she suffered a serious head wound. Maybe she'd been glassed at the previous bar before she got kicked out, and she walked in, and he had a walker, and the stage was so if you walk in the front of the room, you walk in the door, the stage is directly to your right. So as you walk in, the whole audience is facing you, and you've got to be discreet. If you're going to come in halfway through that particular show, you're going to have to be discreet about it, because otherwise the whole audience's attention is going to be faced directly on you, which is fine if you're comfortable with it and you're aware of it, because you can sort of sneak through a little bit, and you can just sneak into the back of the room, which a few people did without any hiccups. But this guy had a walker. His wife was sweating blood from the head, or had a serious head wound. He was an alcoholic. He had 3 teeth, and he came in, and they were just that loud drunk. You know, that loud drunk where you walk in and you're like, oh, okay, this is going to be hard to stop. Anyway, so he walked in, he sat down on his walker, had a little seat that folded out on it, and they started talking. She went and got a beer, and then they started talking. He looked at me and he goes, mate, who's this bloody guy talking to? I'm just trying to have a nice quiet beer. Who's he up there? Who's he talking to? I said, mate, everyone, you're at a comedy night. He goes, like, comedy night? What's supposed to be funny? This isn't bloody funny. This is distracting, mate. I'm just trying to have a quiet night with my missus. And this is in the middle of the show, so everyone's looking at me as though I just invited my friend to come in to enjoy some comedy. And I was trying to do that thing I don't know how you handle yourself in those conversations, but where you're being spoken to as though you know a person, and the only thing that you want to prove to everybody else in the room is how little you know that person and how adamant you are about not becoming friends with them. So I was trying to be polite and just sort of nod and then look back at the stage and go, mate, watch the comedy. He goes, I'm not interested in comedy. I'm just here for a quiet night. And then people started looking at both of us and going, guys, stop talking. And I was like, I'm not really talking. Like, I've already been on stage. You should know that I have the comedian's best interests at heart. And the guy's like, why is everyone being so rude to us? I'm going to bloody leave. And I go, mate, honestly. And then by this stage, Blaze, the comedian, the great bloke, got up there. He's like, mate, can you shut the fuck up? And it started to get a little bit awkward because I wasn't sure if he was talking to me or the bloke in the chair. And the bloke in the chair thought he was talking to me. So he started to get on the side of everyone else in the room. And I said, oh, there's been a huge misunderstanding. But I think eventually what happened was people started to realise, okay, Tyson's just doing his best part. Tyson's a really good guy. He's a lovely fella. He's one of the best blokes we've ever known. You know, I'd invite him to my birthday any time of the week. I'm going to get him a birthday present this week, this Tuesday. That's the kind of guy he is. We love Tice. And then I had the vibe. I don't know. They didn't do it. I had the vibe. Everyone started chanting my name. Do you know? That could be narcissism, but that could be a fairly accurate read of the room. We'll never know. You shouldn't just assume that a room full of people didn't want to just start chanting my name. You don't know them. You don't know how they live in Geelong. You don't know what they were drinking. Maybe they were hallucinating, and the only way out of the hallucination was being told to yell the secret password in unison, which happened to be Tyson Popplestone. And so the guy got up, and it got awkward for a while. There was when you just get the energy zapped out of the room, like you're at a kid's football game, and everyone's just having a nice chat on the sideline, having a nice coffee early on a Sunday morning. And then all of a sudden there's one dad there he's way too passionate about football and starts calling the umpire a C word. You start yelling C word at the umpire and everyone's like, oh, geez, Peter, we're just here to watch the under-6s. Do you know what I mean? This is Auskick, mate. You know, put your knife away. What you're really going to... That guy's volunteering in the umpire role. It's his first game. Don't worry if it was holding the ball. He goes, my son's only had 12 disposals. I go, mate, it's 3 minutes in. That's exceptional. He's actually on target for a record. It's one of the highest possession counts we've ever seen this early in a game. It's actually his just disposals which have let him down. It's his disposals that he's inefficient with. It doesn't matter if you're Tom Mitchell and get 53 touches a game, unless every one of those touches is used with, a certain degree of accuracy. It doesn't really matter how many touches you get. He goes, it's my boy. I'm just doing my best for my boy. I go, Pete, have a coffee, mate. Just have a coffee, put your feet up. But you know what I mean? Like, it just kills the atmosphere of the game because everyone's there thinking that it's more of a social event. It's more of a chance just for people to have a little bit of a chat together and get to know each other as their kids go through the world of football. And then there's just this one drunk dad, or a dad whose AFL dreams didn't quite come true as a junior, who has to adjust and project his own desires and disappointments onto his son, which is an area I've got to be really careful at, because I think I tend towards being the Peter of a group if I'm not careful, especially if my boy hasn't got the most possessions on a ground that early in a game. But sorry to any Peters out there who are actually just passive, observers of their kids' football game. I didn't mean to Karen you. I didn't mean to chuck you in the Karen group. I do feel sorry for Karens. It's been a tough 12 months for Karens, I think. Because I know some lovely Karens, and then all of a sudden one angry Karen goes nuts, and just the reputation of a Karen is spread and used, and it really flourished in the environment of COVID, didn't it? But anyway, I guess that's just the nature of childhood sport. I always noticed that there was a kid I used to play football with. I think his name. Actually, I remember his name. His name was Justin Wood, and I have a memory, but I don't know if it's wrong. I think his dad was a little bit of a wild man. I'm going back to under 12 AFL football here. Sorry, Justin Wood, if I've named the wrong man here, but I had a feeling your dad was a little bit of a wild man. But there's one in every team, and it can really bring down the atmosphere in a particular room, and open mic comedy is no different. Thank God we don't have any Peters there yelling at their kids about football, because I was going to say, mate, you're out at a pub with your son at 9 p.m. on a Friday night. Football's the last thing you guys should be talking about. But then there's other rooms which are the complete opposite. There's just like a great vibe in the room. Did I tell you guys about the only time I ever met Jordan Peterson? That was a crazy experience. So speaking about the open mic comedy scene here in Melbourne, I was at a little room just off Flinders Street called the Highlander. Their last night is tomorrow, I think. They're having their last gig tomorrow night. And the Highlander is about a 200-metre walk from a place called Speakeasy HQ, which I found out is a little vaudeville room. Cool little space where, you'll get your magicians, you'll get your comedians, you'll get your... did I say musicians or magicians at the start? Because all of those are there. Like, it's a really diverse... You'll have burlesque dancers in the room. Anyway, I was at Highlander, so 200 metres away from Speakeasy HQ, when one night a guy came up to me and he goes, hey, it was during the time that Jordan Peterson was on his Australia trip, and he goes, hey, did you hear Jordan Peterson's around the corner at Speakeasy HQ? So I heard this, and at the time, no idea, no reference as to what Speakeasy HQ was. I assumed it was like a book gig, a book tour, where he was just there speaking to an audience who had paid for tickets. And I said, oh, dude, like, what is this? He's like, oh, it's just it's a little performance room. So I thought, okay, there's going to be a few hundred people in the room. But nonetheless, it'd be cool to see JP in the flesh. So I left and I said, hey, do you reckon I'd be able to get in? They go, mate, anyone's allowed in. So I walked around to Speakeasy HQ. I walked upstairs and there was a couple of guys there was one guy on stage, a couple of acts in the room, and there was just about seven people in the audience, three of which consisted of Jordan Peterson's wife, Tammy, I think is her name, and Dave Rubin. And so I fangirled so hard in this particular point. First of all, because I thought, man, this is exactly where I'd expect to see Jordan Peterson. It's got that dark arts kind of vibe that, just as a bloke who doesn't know Jordan Peterson, apart from what I've heard about him and I've watched of him, which is quite a lot in fairness, it served as a place where I thought, yeah, of course you're here. It was a really cool vibe, and I say that to him as a compliment, as like, yeah, this is exactly where I'd expect Jordan Peterson to be, and it made me even more proud to be in this room. And anyway, so I thought, oh no, like I'm gonna be that guy, because I could feel my wife is shattered because she was down the road. S Club 7 was just doing a tour, their last tour. They had 3 members of the original group, and I texted her going, babe, you'll never guess who I'm in a room with. Jordan Peterson. She's like, I'm stuck at a bloody S Club 7 concert. She was there with a best friend. They had tickets booked for months, so there was no escape for her. Anyway, there was an intermission, and I thought, oh, what am I going to do? There was boys lining up to speak to him, and as I said, there was probably 15 of us in the room in total. And I thought, okay, well, I'm going to have to be that bloke. I'm so embarrassed because I've heard him talk about, and he seems to speak about it with an element of respect, and he always seems as though he handles it with a whole heap of, humility, and I like it, but I also understand how important just a little bit of free time is when you've got a reputation like he does. But the moment got the better of me. I couldn't help it. I sort of shuffled over with my head down a little bit and just stood at the back of the group, and eventually my time to meet him came up, and man, the guy was I do not understand how anyone in the world can have a problem with him. Like, I understand that, emotions are a really powerful thing, and some of the things that he speaks about can be fairly emotional, but the guy, like, you listen to him speak, and first of all you go, okay, he makes a whole heap of sense, but then second of all, you meet him in person like this. He didn't know me from a bar of soap. He's trying to have a night out with Dave Rubin and his wife, and he had all the time in the world. He made eye contact. He goes, hey, what's your name? I spoke to him, and I reckon we were talking for just 2 or 3 minutes, and for him it was just another conversation. For me, I was there going, oh my gosh, like my heart was pounding. I was trying to keep the conversation like just natural, but I could feel my face going a little bit red, and then at the end of it, he goes, man, like, thank you so much for coming and let me knowing how much my work has helped you. I really appreciate it. He used my name again, and then Dave Rubin was next to him as well. At the time, I didn't know Dave Rubin as well. But I knew my wife loved him, so I said, Dave, like, how you doing, man? My wife's a huge fan of your work, and I've heard a little bit of what you had to say, and I like a lot of what you're going about as well. And he was exactly the same, and it was a cool experience just to be able to be in a room that you would expect a bloke like Jordan Peterson to be in, that dark arts kind of vibe. If you listen to his song that he's just released on his YouTube channel, I can't remember what it's called. Wish I could remember what it's called. But if you listen to that song, you go, you know what, that song could be played at Speakeasy HQ. And so, man, the amount of times that I've told that story since that particular night is, I've got value for money based on the fact it was free entry into that place. It's one story I've told to so many people. But I think that's one thing that I love, because you know how you say you're told never meet your heroes. You don't want to meet your heroes because the reputation that they have in your mind doesn't match up to the nature of the person in general. I left with the reverse experience. I went in there thinking so highly of him, and left thinking even more highly of him. And as a side result, got really into what Dave Rubin had to say as well. So, man, it was a really cool experience. If you're in Melbourne, you haven't been to Speakeasy HQ, you got to go check it out. It was a really cool vibe. But anyway, JP's coming back to Melbourne later in the year, so I've quietly got my fingers crossed that he's going to be back there, so I can say, hey man, remember the last time that we got up and. It was he won't. I would never do it. I say I would never do it, but then the moment comes around and the emotion gets the better of me. I remember I was at a Russell Brand concert back in 2017, and at the end of the night, I say a concert. It was a stand-up comedy gig. It wasn't a concert at all. There was no music. There was a spoken word poet, but that was the extent of, even he wasn't really rhyming. I don't understand poetry that doesn't rhyme exactly, but what he had to say didn't rhyme, but it was still quite good. Then at the end of the night, he said to the audience, he goes, hey, thanks for being here. Why don't you come up and say hello? I go, what does he mean, come up and say hello? And then he goes, no, I mean it. Like, come up to the front of the room and say hello. And man, I'd been such a fan of Russell Brand for so long that I thought, oh no, what am I going to do? Because I saw hundreds of women jumping over chairs to get to him. Most men in the room were sitting there pretty cool, pretty calm, pretty collected, as though they had their emotions in check. And as I was noticing how cool the men were sitting there and how emotional the women were just jumping the chairs, I found myself jumping chairs along with the women to try and get to the stage. Women, I'm not kidding, there were women pushing, there were women grabbing shirts, there were women pulling, and I thought, oh my gosh, like I can't get involved in this. But I thought, well, how many times am I going to meet Russell Brand? So I started getting women in choker holds, I started pulling, started nipple cripple. No. There was one nipple cripple, do you know what I mean? And she was an elderly woman who wouldn't have been able to fight back. So I felt like it was a tame entrance into the argument. But she shouldn't have been climbing chairs, to be honest. Like for her climbing chairs, she may as well have been in a mosh pit. But that's just the nature of the beast. You know, rest of the soul, I grabbed a little bit too hard. She never woke up. But that's, you know, that's the way it is in the real world. You got to be careful. My wife, we went and met Rob Bell. Rob Bell's the author of so he's a controversial figure in the world of, like in church world. He wrote a book years ago called Love Wins. He used to pastor a church called Mars Hill. He wrote this book. It's called What is the Bible? Really interesting. Gives you a bit more of a modern take or an understanding on what's actually going down in this book that so many of us don't understand. But in the church world, man, he copped some criticism for some of his views because, you know when I think COVID's a great example. You know when you go off the mainstream narrative of what's really going on and you just start asking questions, and all of a sudden there's not everyone, but there's a certain group of people who go, oh my gosh, I can't believe you've even asked that question. Are you an anti-vaxxer? You're like, no, I'm just curious. I'm trying to find out what's going on. The church world is very similar. Like the church world is, and not a lot of people. Like there's a few extremists in any group. Like you get 100 people together, and there's always going to be a couple of nutters, yeah. But the church world, there's definitely maybe a few more than a couple of nutters. But Rob Bell copped it because he was going against the convention of what it was that we had been told for so long. But he came to Melbourne as well, and after his gig, I guess it was like a sermon. It was a Q&A more than anything. He said, oh, I'd love to go and meet all you guys. Make sure you come out, give me a hug. I thought, hey, that sounds like a good thing to do. So we got in the line, and I love this guy. Jesse loved this guy, and I thought, oh, okay, Tyce, just keep it together. You don't want to embarrass yourself in front of your wife, in front of Rob Bell. What you got to do is just keep it cool, play it cool, and and just see how this plays out. And anyway, so halfway through the line, my wife pulled me aside and she's like, all right, babe, this is what I want to say to him. And she started practicing. She's like, all right, babe, all right, I'm going to say, hey, Rob, thank you so much for, your alternative take on what it is that so many people are uptight about and don't want to hear about, blah, blah, blah. And she did a couple of rehearsals, but then the emotion got the better of it because we were next in line. He said, hey, come forward. And she grabbed him by the hand. She's like, oh my God, keep doing what you're doing. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep doing what you're doing. It sounded, it was a very similar statement to what she was saying when our second child was conceived. Do you know what I mean? But there's certain things that I say on here and I go, okay, well, if I play that back to her, I'm going to be in a lot of trouble. Because she's a little bit more, she's a bit more conservative than me in the sense that there's some things she likes to keep to herself. Which is beautiful. Like I think that's just a healthy human, isn't it? Like there's some things that you talk about in your family that you don't talk about on a public space, like a podcast, which is both being recorded visually and is it audio sonically or is it just audioly? But you get what I'm saying. Like this is going out to the public, and I just felt her judgment in my ear or in my face as I said that. And I wish I could retract it, but unfortunately that's where it is. But I don't know. Meeting celebrity is an interesting thing because there's a few. I often think, oh man, like if I met Joe Rogan, I think I would fanboy. I like to imagine I would play it cool. Who else would I fanboy about? I don't know if there's that. I don't know how many people there are. Mind you, it's something about just having. It's something about seeing a person that a lot of people know, a lot of people recognize, a lot of people. Like they're aware of the fact he's a public figure, and there's something that just has to acknowledge that, isn't? I don't know. I'm not sure what I'm trying to say, but nonetheless, meeting celebrities is a difficult thing. I'll tell you something else just before I make myself sound like too much of a celebrity junkie. Yesterday morning, this is sort of a humble brag without it meaning to be, and I'll tell you. Well, I'll tell you the story, and I'll let you read into it as you will. So yesterday morning, it was my turn to get up to my little mate, little Charlie boy. and look after him for the morning. So we got up. Usually what I do, I get up, I'll get him a banana. He likes a banana for breakfast, just to kickstart the appetite. He has a little bit of water. I make a coffee. And in the morning, like, he's a little bit dozy, he's a little bit tired, so I've got to pick him up and carry him around and just make sure he's comfortable just while he's waking up. And yesterday morning, the top drawer was open. I had my loose tracksuit pants on, no jocks early in the morning. Problem is, our cupboard with our coffee equipment is in a cupboard, which is, you know, with a kid in your hand, it's kind of a little bit of a reach. You sort of got to reach over the top drawer, which was slightly open, to get the French press for the coffee. And yesterday morning, I was holding Charlie. I reached up to get the French press out of the cupboard above the top drawer. But as I've leaned over the top drawer, the momentum of holding Charlie carried my body weight forward. And because my pants that I was wearing were quite loose and I didn't have jocks, it meant my willy was actually between the drawer and like the solid wooden block where the drawer slams into when it closes. So yesterday morning, I got my knob completely stuck in the top drawer. This is not a made up story. I'm not just trying to make you laugh. This is an event that took place in the Popplestone household yesterday morning, and it's shut so tightly that it wasn't like you could just open the drawer and it sprang tightly, because so the top of the bench was here, the top of the drawer was there. So to get in and shut, it had to be squeezed between the two and sort of just dangled down into the knife drawer, just here like that. So that's what's going on. So I realized what had happened. I tried not to yelp. Like, it's so hard not to laugh as well, because I just couldn't believe my knob had been stuck in the top drawer. And then I had to sort of yank it, because you know if you put if there's a door that bangs and you put a cloth between it, it sort of closes that gap between the door frame and the actual door, so it stops it jiggling. Well, my pecker had served as that thing to stop the drawer wiggling. So that drawer was just locked in tight. So I had to give it a real good pull to get me out. So I tell you that only because as I moved a moment ago, I still felt a little bit of tenderness, a little bit of soreness just around the bruising. And what? Like, how's the luck? Because I often you think of those stories, or you see in a movie. What was the Adam Sandler movie? I think it was, or Ben Stiller, where he's going to the toilet and he goes to do up the zip of his pants and he zips right over his old fella, and you go, oh man, like, imagine if that ever happened. And so there we were. Yeah, it's one area you got to be careful of. I'm not sure if I told you guys earlier in this podcast, not today, I mean months ago. But my uncle was an ambulance officer, and he went to a BMX accident one day where a guy's actual nutsack had been torn open, and you could just see his little balls like actually just sitting there. So the skin had all peeled around the balls, and these testes were just there not actually doing this, but you know what I mean. Like, they were just, if he stood up and wiggled, you could see them wiggle. Is what I'm trying to say. And he took a photo because he was like, all right, I'm going to have to show this to the nurse when we get to the hospital. But then later in the night, he sent it to another ambulance officer just to go, mate, like, you wouldn't believe what happened today. Look at this for an accident. And then, I'm not kidding, I had randomly caught up with a mate about a month and a half later, and I was telling him this story. And he goes, dude, that's so crazy, because I got a photo sent to me completely randomly a couple of days ago, which sounds as though it's the photo that you're talking about. Anyway, he showed me the photo. This photo that my uncle had taken to send to another ambulance officer just to go, hey, mate, how crazy is this? It had gone viral. And then there was about 12, I don't know how many degrees of separation, but it was just funny to be sitting in a cafe with a mate who knew nothing about the fact my uncle took the photo, and him holding up a person's nuts just jiggling around, not literally, but if he stood up and wiggled, jiggling around, just doing his thing. Should we have a look at what's trending on Twitter this week? I thought this is something I want to do because Twitter's a dangerous place. I don't know. Do you guys spend much time on it? I've had a bit of a look over the last couple of weeks, and I'm honestly amazed at the things that trend. So I thought, hey, let's go through this together. I'm not going to go through it in any great detail. Let me just find one that that sounds interesting. All right, okay. What's happening? War in Ukraine. Live attacks on Ukrainian cities continue as Russian rockets hit base 10k from Polish border. I'm out of my depth there, to be honest. A lot of people are talking about this at the moment. I'm glad to talk about it just because of the fact that it's something other than COVID. Do you know what I mean? But it's not something I want to get into. Latest updates on flooding in Queensland, New South Wales. Here we go. Trending in Australia. JK doesn't speak for me. What's that? JK Rowling. Here we go. Emma Watson appears to shade JK Rowling while presenting Hollywood stars are interesting, aren't they? I don't really want to get into this either. You don't speak for me, and literally all of my LGBTQIK friends and family give out loves, vile tweets. Okay, JK doesn't speak for me. Not interested in that either. There's never really much positive trending on Twitter. I'm going to be honest. That I stand with JK Rowling. How to verify information involving war in Ukraine according to fact checkers and experts. Not interested in that. So, here we go. Maths AU. So Married at First Sight. Married at First Sight is something I'm ashamed to admit that I like. I like to talk about how much time and effort I spend on just developing my mind, my body, my spirit, you know what I mean? And things like maths, which is just like a real life gossip magazine, just has no place in my life, but it's so good. Oh my gosh. If you're a man out there who feels ashamed to admit in public that you enjoy this TV show, hey, just take comfort in the fact that I don't usually speak about it openly, but I hear you. I hear you, you know what I mean? Ladies, I get it. Between you and I get it. Last night there was a commitment ceremony. I can't remember her name, but it was like the Latino chick. She cheated on her husband. It was riveting TV. Whatever. Producers have been forced to intervene on maths as the show went awry with a shock moment and ended in mass boycott. It wasn't really a mass boycott if you haven't seen it. It was, seven of the other people who were on the show got up and left. It still felt a little bit producey. I was hoping there was going to be more to talk to you about from the Twitter feed. I thought there would have been a couple of bangers, but anyway, that wasn't the most riveting first edition of what's going on in the world of Twitter right now, but it was a start. We'll see what happens next week. You and I, just once a week, we'll touch base. We'll see what's going on. So this week it was maths. Maths was a highlight, sort of. J.K. Rowling's causing dramas. Is she, though? You know what I mean? Like, Harry Potter was famous, but it wasn't that good a book. And the war in Ukraine, I'm out of my depth. I don't know. I can't comment. I'm just... it's one of those things that, like, 6 months ago, I never heard anyone... A month ago, I never heard anyone speak about the tension between Russia and the Ukraine. And now, all of a sudden, there's so many people in my life who know all about it. They've got the Ukrainian flag next to their Twitter handle, their vaccination things being deleted. Some people have really committed to the whole extreme. They've got the 3 vaccination needles, they've got the flu needle, they've got the mask, now they've got the Ukrainian flag. I reckon by 2025 they're going to need to expand the room for your name on Twitter, because there's a few people making some big calls. What else have we got here? Immune system, pothole, front yard, how long to give it. That's one thing I wanted to find out. I wanted to find out what the average time that you give a book before you realize it, or before you decide it's a rubbish book. Because all right, this starts on a positive note. Just the other day, I finished a book by Stephen King, the audiobook. I always feel like I have to justify that because my brother-in-law says, you didn't finish your book, you listened to the audiobook. Okay, dickhead, I heard the story. Someone read it to me, which is far more enjoyable. It was called Later, and from the moment the book started, I was into it. I loved it. I couldn't get enough of it. I thought, hey, this is fantastic. But then I thought, okay, well, every one of Stephen King's books going to be like this for me. And then there was I tried, what was it called? I think I just gave it back yesterday. I called Audible and said, hey guys, sorry to do this to you. Like, I hope you're not having too busy a day, because there's something I'm going to have to get you to do. I can't remember what it was called. But I got about half a chapter into it, and I was like, all right, this is not for me. Do you have a little bit of a gauge? Do you have a bit of a rule as to how long you got to give yourself before you realize it's a rubbish book? I reckon a chapter should be heaps. I don't know. I know you can't talk back to me right now, but if you could shoot me a message and let me know, because it'll make me feel a whole lot better. Oh, wait, one of the things I wanted to talk to you guys about before we wrap this bad boy up. I know we've nearly been going an hour. Is so. I don't know if you remember, a few weeks ago, I told you about how many people that unfollowed me on Instagram based on the fact I'd been pretty vocal about a lot of my thoughts on a whole heap of stuff, which I can't be bothered going into right now, but had heaps to do with COVID. Anyway, like about 80 people. I started paying attention to who unfollowed me, and I thought, okay, it's interesting, because usually I don't take that stuff too personally, or I didn't think I did. But then all of a sudden I started to see a few people who I actually liked that gave me the old flick, and I was like, oh, gee, this is painful. This is... One of them I stumbled across because, well, in fairness, I actually didn't realize I didn't follow him. But then I got a message. I got a message in response to something I posted, and it went into that request folder. Like, when you don't follow someone and their messages don't go straight to your inbox, it goes to the request. What went in there, I thought, hang on a second, what's going on there? But then this morning, I told you, I caught up with Shaney and at the park with little Charlie boy where he got hit by a swing, do you know what I mean? Bark in his ear. It wasn't today, but it was the same location. Still brings back sort of pretty heavy memories. And she goes, I just got off the phone to Kate, who, so for reference, Kate is an absolute superstar. Kate is a legend. She's a stunner. She's just an all-round great human. If I had any single mates, I'd be happy to hook them up with old Katie. Anyway, I must have gone through like a bit of an Instagram cleanse the other day, and it's not her actual name. So I think her Instagram name is, actually I won't give it out just so she doesn't cop any heat from anyone who's on this podcast, but I knew her Instagram name, but I must have been scrolling through really quick one day, just unfollow, don't know that name, bang, 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 bang. Anyway, so Shaney was on the phone to her this morning and said, hey, I'm just about to go catch up with Tyce and Jess, and she goes, I used to love those guys, but they unfollowed me on Instagram. I don't know what I've done. And I totally get it. Like, I get that headspace of like, because I start to question it now. People unfollow and you go, I've really upset them. I can't believe how much I've upset them. But the problem was I got I got a flip side view. Is that what it's called? I got a flip side view where you realize, no, I love this chick. Like, there's nothing she's done to upset me. I must have just been in the zone one day and unfollowed. Whereas Jessie has a rule. She's like, all right, if I haven't spoke to the person in 6 months, she uses Instagram more as an actual social connection kind of thing. So she had unfollowed, I think, because of the fact that these guys just hadn't spoken. But she loves her as well. And then, how do you guys go with the Instagram unfollows? Because it can be a sensitive topic. Some people even have an app. You can get this app. My sister had it. That's how I know. You can get this app, which is I think it tells you who unfollows you. I go into the more the nitty gritty details. I find out for myself. I go and do the digging, thinking, this person I reckon would disagree with me. Maybe they've unfollowed me, but I put a bar on that now because anyway, what I'm trying to say is, isn't it amazing how sensitive we can get to that? And it wasn't until today that I realized, oh man, like, I don't think everyone's intentions are that bad because I actually still love this chick. Do you know what I mean? And I bloody given the wrong impression. Poor Katie. What a superstar. Anyway. Oi, don't you reckon, this is something I was thinking the other day, I reckon being called an anti-vaxxer based on the fact you're hesitant to have this particular vaccine is like being called a homophobe because you didn't let a gay man have sex with you. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's got to be a few steps in between. You can't just be a homophobe, because I've got plenty of gay friends, but none of them do I want to have sex with me. Like, even the really good looking ones, I go, you know what? I just don't think it's my thing. You know what I mean? It's a very vulnerable position. I've heard people talk about pegging the last few months. I'm not even open to that. It's just something I was thinking about. Imagine if to treat like homophobia in society, we all had to get double jabbed. Do you know? Double jab, yeah, you know what I mean. You know what I'm trying to say. It's something I'm flirting with. Like, the premier of your state comes onto TV and goes, look, homophobia is a huge issue in our state. We don't want any homophobia in the workforce. So, to prove that you're not a homophobe, you need to get double jabbed by a gay man. You go, do I really have to do this? I don't want to do it. People like my dad would be like, nah, I'm not doing it no matter what. Then they go, all right, well, if you don't do it, you can't go to work. We've mandated it now. They go, all right, well, I'll get double jabbed, but that's it. Then 3 months later, he comes on. He goes, all right, guys, sorry, it's time for your booster shot. This is going to be a gay sex economy. If you haven't been double jabbed by a beautiful gay man, you can't participate. I don't know. I feel like that opens up the conversation a little bit more, because I think there's some people who are a little more anti-vax, and yeah, I don't know. Anyway, that was just something I was flirting with. Now, this is the book of the week. Before we wrap it up, The Writer's Journey. I say book of the week. It's that fat. It's going to take me forever to read, but talks all about the hero's journey. It talks about the way that stories are structured. It talks about I don't know. I'm just fascinated about what makes a good story good. So if you want a good book, I'm not going to restart the timer, because this camera only goes for 30 minutes. So I'm going to turn it off in a minute. This is how I'm going to finish the podcast. The Writer's Journey is the book of the week. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the song that we're going to finish the week on. If we get it, there we go. Hey, God bless. See you all next week.